Hello, am I audible to everybody? Am I audible to everyone? Okay, good. Um, Please feel free to use the reactions or the chat box. It's not a strict platform. It's a very non-judgmental platform. I'm Vanshika, and today I'll be taking today's workshop on bibliotherapy and poetry therapy by the Psychic Mantra. So before I start with the therapy, I would want to ask how everyone's day was, like maybe with a thumbs up, with the heart emoji, the celebration, or the sad one, anything like just describe how your day is with the emoji. Okay, that's nice. So I'll brief you all about the psychic mantra. So the founder of Psychic Mantra is Ria Kurania ma'am, and she is the lead therapist at this organization. And she takes different sorts of therapies, like from counseling therapy and family, like from counseling to family therapy, bringing a deep understanding of human mind to her practice. So if anybody is looking for a therapist of any age group, anybody can reach out to her and she will help you with empathetic, personalized therapy solutions to all age groups. Now, moving on with bibliotherapy and poetry therapy. So, does anybody know about it or have heard about this sort of therapy? Yes, Pragati ma'am. Pragati ma'am, would you want to share or you can text if you're not comfortable speaking?
Bibliotherapy is therapy which we provide by means of books, by reading any article or book, exploring the emotions in context of that writing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So, as Pragati ma'am has mentioned, bibliotherapy is the use of reading materials like be it fiction, non-fiction, poetry, essays, or plays. These sort of reading materials that support mental health, that promotes personal insight, and also encourages emotional healing is what bibliotherapy focuses on, and it is usually involved in guided or independent reading, followed by reflection, discussion, or any sort of therapeutic intervention depending on the context. So, we'll just go into a little history or the origin of bibliotherapy. So, in the ancient origin, the belief in the healing power of words is ancient. So, in Egypt, there was this library of Pharaoh Ramesses II. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but that library was described as the house of healing for the soul. Now, they used reflecting the understanding that literature could offer comfort and transformation among people. And this ideology was very similar in ancient Greece as well, where the philosophers like Aristotle they discussed the concept of catharsis, which means that the literature and the drama were used to release emotional tension. Basically, you see something, you get emotionally involved in whatever you are viewing, and you sense happiness, sadness, anger after you look at it. So that was the little ancient origins of bibliotherapy. Now, how is it termed in modern development? First, it was coined in 1916 by Samuel McCord Crothers. He described it in an essay as a new science of prescribing books as medicine. Now, during the World Wars, particularly World War One and Two, doctors and nurses in military hospitals they used literature, mostly novels and poetry, to aid soldiers recovering from trauma and physical injuries. And mostly by the mid 20th century, bibliotherapy began to be recognized in psychological and educational fields. So we can say that approx in the 1960s and 1970s, the professionals they started using literature as a tool to address emotional and behavior challenges in schools and clinical settings. So got a brief idea about what bibliotherapy is, right? Now we'll go move on to types of bibliotherapy. So we'll talk about creative bibliotherapy, clinical bibliotherapy, and developmental bibliotherapy. Now, what is creative bibliotherapy? It is basically a non clinical and is usually practiced in educational or self help concepts or contexts because and it's mostly used in involving reading literary works that helps individuals reflect on their experiences or their values or emotions. And usually these types of this specific type of therapy can be used in various areas like in group discussions, personal journaling, art activities, or storytelling sessions because it's very creative, right? And the main goal for this type of therapy is the emotional exploration rather than the diagnosis or symptom reduction. Now, who all uses this? People like teachers, librarians, counselors, or even peer support groups. All these people use this sort of creative bibliotherapy to get everybody together and help them emotionally explore themselves. Now, if we have to take this form of therapy in an example form, let's just say a school counselor might choose a novel named Wonder by R.J. Palacio, and it's for a group of middle school students. Now, the school counselor chooses this specific book is because the book follows, like the synopsis of the book is where a young boy with facial difference navigating school for the first time. So through the story the students can explore themes like empathy, kindness, and bullying because the young boy has facial difference among other people. So he will obviously get bullied. He will some will treat him with bullying, some will treat him with kindness, somebody will show empathy, someone will show sympathy. The boy has to grow out of the insecurity, so he creates his own self image and also builds his own resilience. So all this will be understood through the story. And after reading, like after the students read stories like this, they might participate in reflective writing activities or group discussions where they share their real personal reactions and learn to understand different perspectives of it. Now, if someone comes up to me and goes like, this I read this book, it helped me understand about how to time manage things. So this is how I'm managing my time these days. Now I feel more organized and work. How did they get into that sort of mindset at the first place? Because they read a self-help book about time management. So that's and they introspected it and they formed a discussion out of it with the other friends. So now not only they know about what they have read, they also understand the other person's point of view so that if it's really helpful they can work on it. Now second type of bibliotherapy is clinical. Now, this is more within formal therapeutic settings by trained mental health professionals. They select books specifically based on clients' psychological condition and therapeutic goals. Now, this sort of therapy often includes self help books, memories, or informative texts that complement the therapy process. And the therapists they assign readings or they discuss the content during the sessions, or they use uh, some topics to initiate deeper exploration of the client's thoughts and feelings. So since it's clinical, obviously like psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, or in conclusion like licensed therapists use this form of therapy. Now If we take another example, a therapist who is working with a client who struggles with depression, let's say, they recommend a book name. Like you, all of you can write down these books if you want to read it. I'm not saying as like I am an expert in bibliotherapy, but I would say that the books that have been suggested is from a lot of research on that helped a lot of people around. So when a person like some the book suggested for a person who is struggling with depression, let's just say they're giving Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy is the book's name, by Dr. David D. Burns. So this book is basically rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, and it usually helps the clients identify and challenge the negative thought patterns. The client that is guided to read specific chapters, or they complete like a workbook exercises, and they bring their insights into therapy sessions. So the therapist may use those reflections to help the client reframe their negative beliefs and track the progress over time. So this is how it works in the clinical setting. Now for developmental bibliotherapy. So this approach is usually towards the psychological and emotional development of children and adolescents. So it basically involves choosing more age appropriate books that help young people navigate common developmental issues like, let's just say, relationships, emotional regulation, identity formation, grief, or family changes. So like stories for young readers with relatable characters or situations, they offer a safe way to confront and process their own challenges. This can be used by parents or child psychologists or school counselors or teachers. So it's not like very uh it it forms like a bridge between formal and not I mean clinical and non-clinical approaches, because this is where you're trying to it's like you read uh yes, the PPT will be shared in the YouTube channel, so you can refer to the PPT in our YouTube channel, same the Psychic Mantra. So I got diverted with the example. So um like let's just say we are reading the story. So this is the book, the kids story book, where there's a wolf who, so let's just say that it is a book of the wolf who dressed up as a pig and then eats up the pigs because they let in a random stranger in the house. So the moral of the story was, don't listen to strangers, don't believe strangers. So that was some brief of a very cute book that I read when I was a kid. So they were like, don't trust anybody, be careful with who you are with, etc. etc. Then there was like the Goldilocks books. So like these are all kids books that teach us moral values, or like any sort of values that for our safety. Or if there are like books linked with like friendships, then those books will help children understand, okay fine, this is how we can go ahead with something. So let's just say like a child is dealing with death of a loved one. The therapist will mostly use maybe a book named The Invisible String by Patrice Cars. If you all want, I can send a list of all these books if you want to read for yourself, or you want to tell it like tell someone else, they suggest it to someone else. So the story basically explains the concept of emotional connection in a simple and comforting way, that people are always connected by an invisible string. So even if they are apart, after reading this, the child, or like after listening to someone read it, the child may be invited to draw pictures or write about their own invisible strings, helping them understand grief and cope with the separation. And if you take another case, like because right now I told in a clinical setting, If we take in a non-clinical setting, a teacher has may use Inside Out and Back Again by Tanha Lai, with adolescent students adjusting to a new school environment or a cultural shift. So this novel is basically where the written in verse that follows a young girl's experience of immigration and identity. So this can help the students explore in themes of like adaptation, loss, resilience, or even encouraging empathy and discussion in the classroom. So till here, did everyone understand bibliotherapy, the types of it, the history of it? Put up a thumbs up if anyone understood. Okay, that's good.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain creative bibliotherapy?
Yes. What exact part, like the basic definition of it, or anything in particular?
Like you said, non-clinical method. So how it is used in non-clinical? That's what I want. Like example, if you can give any.
Huh, okay. Let me just think of an example. 1 second. So, in so we can say like a school teacher, they can ask students to read a story or and then discuss it with the teacher or the them, if it's like a group thing, then with the group, on how a specific story is help them feel or reminded them or someone in their life. So if since it's a school, we have read a lot of poems, we have read a lot of stories, regardless of the age, which whatever grade. So in those stories, one question from the teacher would be like, what did you get out of this story? Because every story has a moral in the end or has a message in the end. So the first question a teacher would ask is, what message do you get out of it? And the student would they may draw a picture or write a short journal entry about a time they helped someone, or and this basically helps them in understanding their own emotions and values without focusing on mental health problems or diagnosis. This is just understanding their emotions without diagnosing themselves. Like the teachers, like if the school counselor, like school teachers, they don't diagnose the students as such or like the children as such, but they help them just express their emotions out rather than just keeping it in. So they say that, oh, if you are sad, you write it down, or if you're happy, you write a small snippet and just treasure it. So whenever you come back to it, you will recall the memories of it. So in that sense, in a non-clinical manner, this is used. This is not for diagnosis. The diagnostic one, that's the clinical one. Over there, now let's just say you have a client who is suffering with anxiety. So you would look into books that relates to anxiety, and if maybe you have read one, you can suggest the client that okay, this is a book that you may relate to, read it, or you would say like read this page and let me know how you feel about it or what you think about it. So in that sense, the client, it's like a small assignment the client is assigned to, which is linked to their diagnosis. And usually you don't straight away say client that you have this diagnosis. The therapist would know. So whatever diagnosis that they make for the client, they tell it that you can read this and get to know about it, etc., etc. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on with the second part of the therapy, that is poetry therapy. Now, I know most of you read it, but has what do you guys know about poetry therapy? Anyone? Even like there's no right or wrong answer. You can just in brief Just when you hear the word poetry therapy, what comes in your mind? That's all right. I'll explain what poetry therapy is. So it's basically an intentional use of poetry, either reading or writing or discussing poems specifically, as a therapeutic tool to promote emotional expression, self discovery, and also psychological healing. So it allows people to explore their inner experiences through metaphor, rhythm, and symbolism. And this provides them a safe space to express a complex emotion that might be difficult to articulate directly. So, the poetry therapy can be used either in individual or group settings, and it also may be facilitated by a licensed therapist, counselors, educator, or someone who's trained in poetry therapy practitioners. So it's just a blend of expressive power of language which with psychological insight to support well-being. Now, another small history of poetry therapy. So earlier, the roots of poetry therapy was as healing art are ancient, and poetry was historically linked to oral traditions, rituals, and communal storytelling. So they often used to process like collective grief, celebrate their identity, or when they want to pass on a wisdom, they used this sort of it's a poet like linking with the storytelling or the poems that they used. And in ancient Greece, poets and dramatists they used verses to explore themes of war, loss, and morality, contributing to the emotional release and experience of the audience. So during that time, it was more related to war because all of this came during World War One and Two, like bibliotherapy, poetry therapy. So through their novels or through their poems, they would write very heart touching themes of different themes, like I mentioned, war and everything. And this links with the audience because they have faced with that traumatic experience altogether. And in the 20th century, since before it was just simple writing, in the 20th century, it was seen as there was like a formalization of poetry therapy as a structured practice that began in United States in the mid 20th century. Now, the main person is Jack J. Leedy, a founding figure. Now, he is a psychiatrist and was widely regarded as one of the pioneers of modern poetry therapy. So, in the 1960s, he began incorporating poetry into group therapy sessions within his patients. And he had a strong belief that the poetry would allow people to explore their feelings that were otherwise repressed or difficult to express. So, finally, in 1969, he edited and published The Poetry Therapy, The Use of Poetry in the Treatment of Emotional Disorders, a foundational text that helped establish poetry therapy as a serious psychotherapeutic method, which leads to, in 1981, the National Association for Poetry Therapy. So, this was established first in the United States to professionalize and promote the use of poetry in therapeutic settings. So, this sort of therapy provides training, certification, and standards of practice for those wishing to become certified poetry therapists or facilitators. Now, this sort of therapy also emphasizes in three primary approaches to poetry therapy. First would be receptive or prescriptive, where the reading and discussing existing poems. Second is expressive or creative, where they write an original poetry or expressive journaling. And third is symbolic or analytical, where they're interpreting symbolic themes and metaphors to explore unconscious material. Now, the current use of poetry therapy today is that it's again used in various settings that we already discussed before, even for bibliotherapy, like mental health clinics, hospitals, new one is prisons, schools, community, etc. So used in it is used to address a wide range of issues from grief to trauma, anxiety, depression, etc. Now let's go with how do both bibliotherapy and poetry therapy work, be it together or differently. So first of all, both these sort of therapies, they facilitate healing and growth by engaging the reader or writer through psychological processes. Now, first comes catharsis, which I mentioned before, which is the emotional release or relief that comes from expressing deeply held feelings. So, when someone reads a story or a poem, or a, they get to know about a character that mirrors their own pain, they may experience a safe space of emotional outpouring. So, over here, if we take writing poetry or journaling, it can usually help release a bottled up emotions, reducing their inner tension. Now, let's just say, for example, like a person grieving a loved one, they may read a poem about loss and they start crying. They feel a sense of relief after being unable to express their sadness verbally. So, with the help of poem, they could feel relief that okay, I can process grief finally. So that's how some people cope with their sort of problems in some situations. Second comes identification. Basically, it's recognizing of oneself in, be it like a character, situation, or even a narrator. So over here, whoever is reading like any book or poem, they connect their thoughts, feelings, or experiences of a character or a poetic voice. Now, this connection can normalize their own personal struggles and also fosters their sense of empathy or self understanding. So, if we take a teenager who's facing bullying, they may identify with the character in a novel who faces similar struggles and feels less alone in their experience. They will like, it's not only me, someone else also faced the same way, be it a fictional or non fictional, because even fictional, they write it with a sort of thought that they can relate to some or the other sense. It's a fantasy that may or may not be real. So they may like, even if it's fictional, I still relate to it. So that's what identification works as. Now, insight. So it's gaining a new perspective or understanding about oneself or a personal issue. So through reflection on stories or poetic language, individuals may come to realizations about their emotions, their behaviors, their relationships. And once they get an insight, they can lead to a meaningful change to clarity. Now, what example can be here for this, for insight? Anyone wants to add for it? Like if you understood the basics of what insight is, like it's all right. So an example we could take is if we write a if write like when writing a poem about anger, it can help someone realize it's rooted in fear or unmet needs. So something that they hadn't, others feel the same way too. It's very a little bit similar to identification, you can say. And it also reduces shames and it builds community. So if a participant in a poetry group hears others share their poem about anxiety and realizes their struggles are not unique, it helps them reduce their self stigma. Now we have talked about what these two therapies is, how they work, who can use it, but we haven't talked on who practiced it, who can practice it. So before we go into that, does anyone want to add in something, ask something, share something maybe? It's a free space. It's no one's gonna judge. You can be open. If you don't want to talk, you can text in the group chat. Okay, so that's all right. Um, we can go with who can practice it. So we talked a lot about therapists, educators, and social workers. So I will give like a brief on how they're going to use it and how can they practice it. So for therapists, firstly, licensed mental health professionals like therapists, like psychologists, counselors, and clinical social workers, they can integrate these two sorts of therapy into their treatment plans. Now, they use it alongside other therapeutic techniques to help a client explore their emotions and to process their trauma and build coping skills. Now, for example, we can take a psychologist, they may assign a poem to a client with depression and discuss the emotional themes during the next session. So, this is how a therapist can practice these sort of therapy methods. Second is educators. So, these are teachers, librarians, and school counselors who often use the developmental or creative bibliotherapy. So this is particularly to help the students um, explore their values, their identity, and their emotions through stories and poetry. And it's especially common in literature or social emotional learning programs where a teacher might introduce a novel about bullying and guide a classroom discussion on empathy and inclusion. Third would be social workers. So, over here in community settings or hospitals or support groups, use poetry and stories to facilitate group dialogue and emotional expression. And it's usually helpful for those clients who are facing grief, addiction, displacement, or even abuse. Lastly, would be peer facilitators. So these are trained peer support leaders who can run a non-clinical workshop or book circles for emotional exploration and community support. So they should, one's main thing is that they should not diagnose or offer a clinical advice because they are peer support leaders, they are not therapists. And so what a peer support leader do is that they create a structure and reflective space. Like let's just say a university peer group leader, they hold a poetry journaling session on handling academic stress to just release the stress part, but not diagnose or tell that why you're having stress, how do you have to deal with it. It's just a small activity which I would be moving on with the next slide with to help you out with releasing a specific sort of emotion. So, first, with this, we come to an end of the workshop, but we have a lot of activities. So, before I move on with the activities, does anyone have anything to say or ask again or share anything? I hope I'm going in a good space and you all are understanding. Okay, that's good to hear. So we have four activities for this workshop. First one is on poetry, where you write and reflect your poetry. You can, if you want, you can take your time right now, or you can take a screenshot of this slide, even though it's going to be on YouTube. And there are going to be various prompts in the resources that we're going to provide once you purchase it. For now, the prompt is very simple and small, will barely take you 5 minutes. You write a 4 line poem beginning with today I gave myself etc etc. Like I'll give like a small example. So I can go like maybe today I gave myself a moment to just breathe, to sit in silence and finally believe that healing is slow, but it starts from within, and peace is a place I'm allowed to begin. So it's like a small poem that I wrote right now, like obviously before the workshop to give an example, but it's like a very small 4 line poem to help you promote mindfulness and grounding to give like a shared vulnerability within yourself, or also maybe give out that creative outlet for processing emotions. So, do you guys want to take time right now and write the small poem, or would you want to do it after the workshop? Give a thumbs up if you want to do it right now. Please give some sort of response so that I can move forward, or should I stay here in the slide?
I'm audible now.
Yes,
So can I share that poem like not right now, but in a group like after the workshop is done?
yes, that would be okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So the second activity is I am poem. So it's a very creative activity, very similar to the previous one, but over here you choose your starting lines. So on that day, I wonder, etc. I hear this, I hear that, I see. So you use these sentences, these short phrases, and you create your own poem. You can take a screenshot again, and whenever you feel low, whenever you want to just like ground yourself and to completely divert yourself into thinking something, you can write down a poem by using one of these prompts and just go with the flow with whatever comes within. So this will also more, it's like more of like a creative type of therapy. So take a screenshot for those who want to work on it later on. So with that, go with the third activity. It's called Lines That Speak to Me. So it's a bibliotherapy activity. Now you, I will be showing you some four quotes after every slide. So you can take screenshots. I'll pause for like a minute in every slide, and you can take a screenshot and then introspect it by yourself after the workshop again. And if you want to share, you can share it in the group as well on how you feel about each quote. So that it's just gonna be like a something to think of for other people as well. So basically, what you have to do is that after I show a quote, you can think about what do these words mean to you. Does it remind you of a personal experience or emotion, or how does it make you feel currently, like when you're reading it, how does it make you feel? So these three questions that are already mentioned below, that's something you can think of. So the first quote would be, I am not what has happened to me, I am what I choose to become, by Charles Young. So you can take a screenshot, and later on you can introspect on how are these words mean, like what does it mean for you, or do you have any experience with it? Like let's just say with this, I feel that I chose who I am right now, regardless of the amount of peer uh, pressure I had in around me, and I chose not to follow the peer pressure, but to follow what I believe in that is right for me, or that's the right path for me, because I chose not to go in a pathway that everyone is accepting you in, but choosing a pathway that isn't accepted by the society, but is accepted by myself because I'm comfortable and I am happy in it. So that is what I that's the meaning I got out of this two lines. It can be something different for someone else. So that's how the activity goes. I hope that made sense. The second one is owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we'll ever do. So with if after, again, you can take a screenshot of this. If I read this quote, it makes me feel very proud of myself, because obviously it's been a good amount of years with a lot of ups and downs I had. And reading this gives me like a validation that I have done good with the pace I'm going with, and I can do better even after all these struggles. So I just have to keep on going and be brave with each step I take. So that's how it makes me feel, or that's what these certain words make me feel. Third is, I have, someone needs some sort of quotes, you can screenshot this and introspect with it. And then this, the last activity, again take a screenshot. So it's a story writing. So with, you know how in school they used to give like this certain filled in gaps that you need to fill to make a story. So you can use this format and write your own story that you feel you could relate with, or you would want the story to go ahead with. Because it is your story, you need to figure out how you want to write the story. So with this type, you might write things that you haven't consciously thought about, and as you go with the flow, there you will open up a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts and feelings that you never even thought about it before you even started with the story writing. So these are some of the activities you could practice for yourself when you need any grounding methods, or you could help. I wouldn't say, I'm not saying like as a licensed person, but if you want like a friend to have something to distract on and they're very creative, they can use some of these methods, because these are just something to distract yourself in a creative manner. All these are creative therapy methods that I'm suggesting. So you can go ahead with that. And with this, we come to the end of the workshop. Before I end it, I would like to say thank you for being a really good audience. I hope I made sense. I hope this workshop was useful for many of y'all. We have an upcoming workshop next Tuesday on journal therapy at 4 p.m. So mark down your calendars. It will be updated in the groups as well. And if anyone is interested in knowing more about cinema therapy, that was our last workshop that we had. So if anyone is anyone some asked for to make like a full integrated program for it. So we are creating resources for that. And if anyone's interested, please to join us. Even for the journal therapy that's on next Tuesday, 4 p.m., please to join that as well. It's going to be helpful. You can purchase our resources and certificate all together. You'll have even more uh, not therapy methods, like activities that you can follow for yourself or for the others, and some of the books that I mentioned and other resources related to today's workshop. So please purchase. It's just 60 rupees. And do join our other workshops as well. Thank you so much. Bye bye.